Flynn.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Agriculture Biosecurity Protection Levies and Charges Collection Bill 2024. The Federal Coalition firmly opposes Labor's Biosecurity Protection Levy, also known as Labor's Fresh Food Tax. This is a tax that will increase the cost of living pressures and drive up food prices, impacting families across Australia. This legislation is another example of the Labor government biting the hand that feeds it. The levies will charge Australian farmers for biosecurity costs of importers. In what universe would the Australian government tax their own farmers to pay for foreigners that bring their products to this country to compete with our own? Ultimately, farmers will be forced to pass on costs if they possibly can, which means families will spend more on their fresh food. The Federal Coalition recognises that a strong and robust biosecurity system is crucial for protecting Australia against the threat of exotic pests and diseases. The Federal Coalition has always supported a sustainable funding model for biosecurity. However, in contrast to Labor's approach, taxing farmers was never considered to be a part of the mix. In the May 23 budget, Labor announced $153 million for biosecurity protection levy that would apply from 1 July this year, which was essentially a fresh food tax on our hard-working farmers. At Senate estimates on 13 February 24, in response to widespread opposition from across the agricultural sector to this proposed levy and its equitable application, the Minister for Agriculture announced that it would be rejigged. The Albanese Labor Government will now set the tax rate of biosecurity protection levy as a proportion of an industry's average gross value of production over a 3-year period, instead of the former base rate of 10% on industry-led agricultural levies. The government introduced a package of bills into Parliament to impose the new biosecurity protection levy on 28 February 2024. The legislation that has been introduced into Parliament lacks any detail on the cost to farmers or how the levy will be collected. It also stipulates that the biosecurity protection levy can be set to nil in the case the cost of collecting the levy in some sector exceeds the revenue that it raises. Labor's biosecurity protection levy remains a fresh food tax on Australia's 85,000 farmers. Shamefully, this government has decided to inflict the new tax as a hit on Australian farmers to make them pay for the biosecurity risks of their international competitors. Deputy Speaker, the industry was blindsided by the announcement of this levy. There was talk of budget measures to address the funding shortfall of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, but at no stage was the levy suggested as a solution. It was stated that consultation on the levy had occurred as part of the government's sustainable funding and investment into strengthening biosecurity. However, there is no mention of a levy in the 2022 discussion paper. The official impact analysis determined that the policy proposal for the BPL was not good practice. The lack of integrity impact statement also does not give industries confidence in the ability for the department to deliver effective biosecurity measures through the BPL. Levies and charges imposed at the request of industry by government following extensive consultation with stakeholders. The funds are spent on what the industry requests. Recent departmental consultation process outlined that this levy would not be subject to producer voting arrangements in regulation to its establishment or change, or will producers, their negative bodies, have a direct role in determining its use. There are growing concerns that funds raised will not be put back into better biosecurity practices for the agricultural sector, but will rather go into consolidated revenue. Stakeholder feedback has pushed for levy to be renamed as a tax or an excise to better reflect its functions. If the levy is to be implemented, industry has requested regular updates and transparent reporting from the department as to how the funds are being spent. The industry is already investing heavily in co-funding biosecurity programs. These contributions were not considered when costing the levy. Not only is this inequitable, but it has put the potential to undermine pre-existing biosecurity efforts by increasing the cost of production for farmers and decreasing their ability to contribute to the levies they were previously contributing to. This threatens the statutory levy system by diverting funds away from existing levies that could be used to respond to a biosecurity threat. If funds from the levy are not well targeted or not allocated to the industry at all, possible funds would be transferred to unconsolidated revenue. The levy could disadvantage Australian producers in the wake of a biosecurity threat. Existing contributions should be recognised by the levy if it is to be implemented. And my question to the Agricultural Minister is, can the Minister guarantee that every cent raised by this levy will go back into biosecurity and the agricultural sector? In contrast to the Albanese Government's and the Federal Coalition's approach to sustainably funding Australia's biosecurity system is targeted at the risk of creators, the importers. Under a Federal Coalition government, Australian farmers will not be punished for the biosecurity risks that others pose. As the Leader of the Opposition announced in his response in the May 23 budget, instead of taxing farmers for biosecurity, the Federal Coalition will introduce an importer container levy, as recommended by the independent Crack Biosecurity Review. Under the former Coalition government, we were a considerable way down this path to implementing this approach. However, this has not been taken up by the current Labor government. By applying a charge to containerised cargo coming into Australia, an importer container levy is a sensible and fair way forward. This is what the Coalition stands for. The Albanese government should apply some common sense and take action that is required and scrap this tax. 2 independent reviews on the Biosecurity Protection Levy conducted by the Productivity Commission and the Australian National University have found that this policy is flawed. Adding to the frustrations of the agricultural sector, these bills outline no details on who the relevant producers actually are when it comes to determining who pays this new tax or how much. In fact, these crucial details will be set out in regulations, which can then be changed or amended. By the time the tax rejig was confirmed in February 24, it was obvious that the government had no idea what the financial impacts will be on different industries. At Senate estimates, the department said they would formally advise industries of their rate in coming weeks or months. A major issue is that these bills do not indicate who will be paying the Biosecurity Protection Levy. The legislation only mentions certain producers. It is expected that it is not just farmers who will be captured by this tax, but also fishers and foresters. The chaos, confusion and absence of detail surrounding this new tax, which is due to take effect in July, is simply not good enough. When it comes to this policy, Labor's consultation process with the agricultural sector and industry stakeholders has been appalling. Additionally, the government does not know how it will collect this levy from the industries which do not currently contribute to the existing industry-imposed agricultural levy system. Based on legislation, it is also not clear whether collection agents are aware how they will collect the levy change from an impacted industry. This is a Labor government that is making policy on the run. This Labor government, which is incompetent, directionless and not across the details of what they are proposing. The imposition of the Biosecurity Protection Levy, a new fresh food tax on Australian farmers and Australian families, is yet another damaging blow to the agricultural sector, which is under constant assault by the Albanese Labor government. Harmful changes are already being inflicted on our agricultural sector, and these includes tearing up the dedicated agricultural visa, which was the biggest structural reform to the agricultural workforce in our nation's history, with Australia's top peak food industry bodies identifying agriculture as facing a shortage of 172,000 workers. To scrap this decision was just an absolute disgrace. Labor's hopeless reliance on the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility, or the PALM scheme, to fill these workforce shortages and changing it so that farmers will be forced to offer a minimum of 30 hours a week despite the agricultural sector being seasonal. The ideological and reckless decision to ban live sheep export industry. Labor is destroying an industry that's worth $85 million and supports the livelihoods of more than 3,000 people. Enormous cuts to regional infrastructure and water projects. These include the federal government's pushing back the start date of the beef corridors upgrade from 2025-26 financial year to the 2027-28 financial year. These delays place a question mark over the ceiling of more than 450 kilometres of Queensland's beef roads, a project that has had the support of 7 mayors from 7 Queensland local government authorities. The roads have been identified as some of the most important roads that would make the biggest impact to supply chains across central Queensland. The roads that will be sealed under funding are Clermont the Alpha Road, May Downs Road, the Diamond Downs Road to Alpha, Tambo Road, Dawson Development Road, the Fitzroy Development Road Bohenia to Doringa, Fitzroy Development Road Taroom to Bohenia, Doringa Apis Creek Road and the Glenroy Road corridor, including the crossing. So, on one hand, the Labor government is betraying the agricultural producers by imposing a levy for something that is not even their product, and then on the other hand, betraying central Queensland by delaying the beef corridor upgrade, an upgrade that will not only improve road safety for all users, but from a strategic web of agricultural supply chains from east to west. The Labor government have shown their lack of concern for the Great Artesian Basin by joining with the Greens and voting down an attempt by the Nationals in Parliament to ensure that important safeguards are put in place to protect Australia's largest and greatest underground water source. The Great Artesian Basin is the largest underground water source in the world. We must protect this water asset of Australia, especially when it comes to carbon sequestration for future generations and the future of the whole water system in general. The current EBPC Act does not go far enough in ensuring the appropriate approval process is in place. The fact that the Labor and the Greens didn't support these amendments shows that they are nothing but hypocrites when it comes to environmental protection. The Nationals are doing everything we can in Canberra to put some protocols around this carbon sequestration, the injection of carbon dioxide into the Great Artesian Basin, to ensure the prosperity of this water source for the future. Deputy Speaker, the Labor government has signed a reckless race to 82% renewables by 2030, which means 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines at a cost of $80 billion will rip up agricultural land, while also chopping down thousands of hectares of native bushland and pristine farmland for wind and solar factories. They've introduced a proposed carbon tax on new vehicles where Australians could pay up to $25,000 more for their favourite SUV or four-wheel drive and up to $18,000 more for their favourite ute, according to research undertaken by the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries. Deputy Speaker, a new tax on farmers will inevitably be passed on to consumers, which means higher grocery bills for all Australians. As the federal member for Flynn, I'm determined to stop this tax on our farmers and on our food. It is unfathomable that the Labor government would ask farmers to pay a biosecurity levy for risks on international importers from other countries. Instead of taxing our farmers, a future coalition government will scrap this tax. Under our plan, importers of foreign products will pay for biosecurity risks that they pose, not the Australian farmers, and that is the way it should be.